Good afternoon. Please take your seats. That means everyone to the right of the room, please stop talking and take your seat. Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the 2019 NIA Annual Conference and Empowerment Session. My name is Ken Branch. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to officially welcome you. We've got an exciting program planned over the next 2 or 3 days. I couldn't be more excited about this conference. We have over 300 members that are going to be participating, and we have some exciting programming for you. Every day is going to be power-packed with lots of fun and intense and focused agenda items. Starting with this evening. This evening's discussion is all going to be about, how many folks are interested in being wealthy? Okay, that's a real weak show of hands. Y'all got how many, I'm talking about money wealthy. How many folks want to be wealthy? Yes, okay. So we've got an exciting keynote speaker this evening. He's going to be talking about wealth management, and he's got some outstanding things to share. So I'm not going to steal from his thunder because, you know, on our board, our counsel for our board is in the wealth management space, and she's going to be introducing him. But this evening's agenda is power-packed. It starts with this session, and then immediately following this session is the reception. So, you know, we're looking forward to you enjoying the session and having a good time. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the discussion this afternoon. So Amy, please welcome Amy Griffin.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Amy Griffin, and I am the principal for the Griffin firm. I'm really excited to say today because I get to be the corporate counsel for NIA, and I have been for about the last 8 years or so. I get the pleasure of introducing Eugene Mitchell. I could talk about his accolades, his school, but I'm not going to. I would say that the first time I heard Eugene, what came to me was to go fast, go alone, to go far, go together. The conversation that I first heard from him was when he was representing a bunch of insurance agents across the country, trying to put $50 billion in the Black community, right, through insurance. And to me, that was a whole transformative conversation. I'm an estate planning attorney, and I see what happens when we don't plan. But Eugene helped me to shape and see how great we can impact and transform our communities. Strong families make strong communities. So Eugene did this incredible thing with the $50 billion. But then he went on to leave there, and then he wrote this book about the 7 secrets to creating wealth, closing the racial wealth gap. Now that's one of the things that we are here for. That's one of the reasons why we come together. That's what we stand for. It's not that we can do this alone. Otherwise we wouldn't join NIA. It's not that we can do this alone, or we wouldn't have parts of an organization and agency. But we're here to do it together. Eugene is going to talk about the collaborative methodologies, the collaborative strategic thinking and planning that we do, that we need to do if we want to close the racial wealth gap, if we want to build foundations that will help us to help eradicate the sins of the past. So I give to you one of my most incredible friends, Eugene Mitchell.
Good afternoon. Come on, let's try and get the energy level up here. Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I'm so excited to see so many beautiful brothers and sisters filling this room from side to side. Congratulations to United on 300 registered this year. I'm just really appreciative of the invitation to be here and for the opportunity to share with you today about this great theme that you have. about diversity and inclusion and how we need to make the business case about this. And I want to share with you ways that I would like for us to talk about working together to close the racial wealth gap. Because it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that we've been able to work towards doing with life insurance. You guys okay with that?
Yes.
All right. So I'd like to start my presentation with you today with a quote from my favorite floaters, the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, who said that we have the responsibility to live up to the legacy of those gone before us by doing all that we can to help those who will come after us. Let me say that again. We have the responsibility to live up to the legacy of those gone before us by doing all that we can to help those who will come after us. Right? And for me, it's a reminder of the why that gets me up every day. And for that, the work that we do here is so much bigger than ourselves. Right? And this conference, and this conversation, and this quote is so timely this year with the commemoration and spotlight on Black history. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Who knows what's so special about this year? 400 years, right? 1619 to 2019. There's a national movement to reframe America's 400-year history, to place the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of American story. And in this, I embrace the significant achievements, the perseverance of our spirit, and the progress that we've made. But also in this, I think about where we can also celebrate the larger diaspora, right? The continent of Africa, and the rich history that started well before 400 years here. We took our children to Egypt last year. They got immersed in the 4,000, 5,000 years before Christ that Blacks will make an impact in the world, right? All of these are the shoulders on which we stand, and the legacy that we must live up to for those who fought for us to be here today. And from this recognition, we must harness our greatness from this history and the tough lessons of our past to chart our course for the next 400 years in an ever-evolving country and world dynamic. See, both the African American community and the larger Black community. I'm talking about West Indians. Any West Indians in the room with me? How about Africans in the room? Yes, of course. Black Hispanics, Black Europeans, and of course African Americans, right? All of us must make sure now that we are in the game, and we are in the room, and that we are in the deals that are coming, or we risk being left behind in this burgeoning world dynamic. It's unfortunate, however, that many in our community continue to struggle with being prepared to move forward. And they're plagued by issues like health and financial stability and criminal justice and lack of education. But one thing for me is that when you look at each one of these issues, in this capitalist society, it is wealth that is the means to mobilize ourselves, our families, and our communities. You see, wealth equals opportunity, and it opens closed doors. And the lack of wealth creates hard times and stagnation. Let's be clear. When I'm talking about wealth, I'm not talking about brand name clothes and shoes and bags and cars, right? That many of us have been misguided to believe that are important. Wealth is a reservoir to pull from for the opportunities like education and homes and businesses and investments, things that can create more wealth. And it also helps you to adequately recover from emergencies. Creating wealth in our community will require a shift in mindset and spending habits, from instant gratification and consumerism to strategies for financial stability and long-term investments. 46 million African Americans, you've heard it, have over $1.2 trillion of earned income. So it's not that we don't have money, but it's what we actually do with it that keeps many of us from advancing. And we must analyze and note the wealth gap. Is what gets me fired up. Between the races, because it's real. And it puts us on different paths from one another. A report from the Corporation for Enterprise Development and the Institute of Policy Services calculates the gap at $571,000 in wealth between the average white family and the average Black family in 2016. Mistakenly, though, many of us think that the wealth gap is just going to start closing on its own. But no, it won't. looking at the things that we are currently doing when it comes to our finances. Even those who think we're doing the right thing, right? Many of us have been told to save more, to eliminate debt, to live below your means, etc. All of those are sound things to do, but they will not close the wealth gap. What we are doing is a pervasive several steps behind for Black people. And because of this, the same study projects that the gap will grow to over $1 million by 2043 unless we make radical changes to close it. The thing we must remember is that as we quantify, we strategize, and we attack this wealth gap, it is vitally important for our greater long-term purpose to mobilize our children and our children's children to be on par with and moving ahead from those around us, as the second part of Ms. Obama's quote says. So, where am I going with all of this with you today? It's that for blacks in America, right, the wealth gap was created by exclusion. Yes, exclusion. Exclusion from land, from loans, from investments like insurance, from fair business, from fair housing, from access to jobs, to technology, to capital and deal flow, as well as limitations on corporate positions and opportunities and equitable employment. This, my brothers and sisters, can and will be solved by our focus now on diversity and inclusion, today and going forward into the areas where we were previously left out. And critical to this is how everyone in the country can win as everyone gets included, and that we will all be stronger for it, right? And that we must make this diversity and inclusion matter and make it happen as a business imperative. Hence the theme for the conference this year. And with this as our mission, we, all of us in the room here, whether we're in underwriting or service or legal or marketing or sales, or from the session earlier, I got risk management, loss control, claims, and IT. We are all needed as agents of change in our industry. Because make no bones about it, insurance is critical in this closing the wealth gap space. Now, as an African American marketing manager for 17 years at one of the largest insurance companies in the country, New York Life Insurance, leading over 1,500 African American agents and managers around the country, I made the case, I did the work, and I delivered the results on the benefits that inclusion of African Americans, both internally and externally, can have to the business bottom line of the company, the employees, and the community. So my conversation to you today is about that. I will give examples of how some of our record successes here in the insurance industry really made a difference, as the company and the agents did both for themselves while we were out there doing good for others. I intend to not only get you fired up, but to reinforce the message and mission of NIA, tie into the agenda for the next 2 days, and plant seeds for a new mission of our coming together to push each other's success and to close the racial wealth gap for ourselves and for those to come, so that each one of you can take on being agents of change as you leave here, return home. Okay? So with that said, let me dive in. I think it's time to share a little known fact about my background that wasn't in my bio, and I apologize for not letting you know earlier. It's the part where I actually spent 4 years of my life in prison in Miami. Well, let me clarify. Okay, especially probably as a black man in America. I was a prison guard in a state prison in Miami. The serious faces over here. What do we do? What do we do? Right? Woo! So the end was locked up. I was behind bars. It was a dysfunctional environment. I was there, right? But seriously, with that said, while I was there, I saw majority black and brown men without hope, right? Without guidance, and without direction. Much of it, I believe, is because of financial hardship and lack of resources. I often wondered, if they had had a college savings plan in place from when they were young, or if they had startup capital for a business, or had a down payment for a home, would they have been on a totally different path? You guys get where I'm going? Seeing this year after year warned me, and I knew I wanted to do something about it. So I decided to work full-time and go back to school full-time for 2.5 years to finish my bachelor's in finance at FIU, Florida International University. And I went to get my MBA at NYU in finance management and entrepreneurship. And after graduating in 2001, I ended up taking a position in a leadership development program at New York Life Insurance during the recession at that time, if you remember. That's when we had the dot-coms and all the tech companies started collapsing. I interned out in California, actually. I knew I didn't want to go back there, and so somebody said, well, go to this old stodgy life insurance company. You know, mutual, it won't be swayed by the market. And so like many of you, I fell into insurance, right? But looking back now, I acknowledge the greater hand of playing and the calling on my life as it played out to provide an opportunity to put my passion and my education to use in proposing an African American marketing unit in a space that I was told wasn't needed for African Americans in insurance. Right? Let me explain it. In this leadership development program, I was asked to do a profitability analysis of the cultural marketing team that they had at the time. They had targeted outreach to the Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Hispanic, and Indian markets. They had targeted resources, recruiting materials, they had campaigns that we were working on, and I could see positive results from all of these programs. So I approached the folks and said, well, why is it that we don't have an African American market strategy? And there were two responses that I received. The first was the company owner. They said, well, you all speak English. You disperse around America. We don't have to do anything targeted specific for black folks. We just use the general market materials. Right? 2001, I was thinking, still, we just use the general market materials? And then there was another group that pulled me aside. They said, well, maybe there's more to the story, but we don't know if you want to hear it. Come on now. Yeah, of course I want to hear it. Now you got me all excited. Let me hear this. And they said, well, there's a general perception by some here, and they've actually gone to great lengths to prove it out, that you all don't want insurance. See, you all would rather spend what you have to buy things that you don't need, right? And that your life insurance policies lapse, and the agents selling them don't make it. So investment in resources into you is a negative return on investment. I'll let that sink in for me. And some people might say that, that type of candor is a good thing, and some might say that's a bad thing. Either way, you know what it did for me? It got me fired up, right? And I put all focus and effort into fixing it for my community. The endeavor was my first major push for diversity and inclusion for African Americans within the agency department of the insurance company. As I approached this work, making sure to heed the warning I received from the concept and the perception given earlier that this market wasn't believed to be necessary, I quickly became clear on the conversations with the powers that be, right, about not telling them that it was the right thing to do, right? Or that we need to push inspirational and aspirational work, because those are faulty arguments that will ultimately fail. Rule number one in this diversity inclusion space: everything has to be wed to the organizational mission, align with the organizational strategies, and or drive the organization's bottom line. They were clear that we were not there and employed for moral imperatives, but for business imperatives. As Dr. Addy said this morning, this game isn't always fair. Right? So I strategically positioned my plan. I figured I didn't know what to do and how to come at this, to impact both the upside and the downside of the company. Driving revenue for the organization by creating this market and showing how to leverage it through sales, and also reducing the liability and the drain from what was considered an underperforming team, which were the African American agents at the time, who had lower sales production, career retention, and promotion into management as compared to other agents in the company. So this became a plan for enhancing sales to African Americans and sales by African Americans. This was different from what I had seen then, and really continue to see now in other companies in approaching this market. And from this unique perspective, the plan was approved and I was on the map and funded. But let me go into a little deeper on this. See, I worked to debunk the myth about this negative return of the African American market by building the case around increased sales into targeted consumer segments, based on market size, targeted spending power, and the desire by some for safe investments with guarantees, saying not everybody wants consumer goods, right? And then I also work to debunk the part about us being able to just use the general market materials. The key in this part of my diversity and inclusion was combating the old just use the white materials because that ignores who we are. In fact, at times that becomes even more negative, as folks feel they don't belong and are not welcome. Many agents commented on simple but hurtful things, like not seeing pictures of successful African American agents proudly displayed on the walls in their offices, like other races. Or not seeing African Americans at the top tier of sales and management meetings, or African Americans basically shown in the marketing materials. This was echoed even stronger in statements I often heard by probably some well-intentioned managers. You know, you've heard them say, I don't even see color anymore. I'm not a racist. Racism is over. Well, that's great, but then you don't see us. How can you not see color? Here's the reality. Research shows that color is the first thing that you see. And research shows that identification by color is the first thing that infants do. It's just the way it is. So this idea that you don't see it means that you are making a conscious decision to ignore a whole part of who someone is, instead of making a conscious decision to recognize it, to respect it, to value it, and to leverage it. You should see it. You should see in it and say, I see value to me and the organization. And that's what we were supposed to be doing, and that's what I was able to show. Especially when there were other cultural markets at the time represented. And just saying, well, theirs was for language translation wasn't genuine and it wasn't inclusive of our African American market. So once I created this market and rallied the agents, I found 525 black agents around the country at the time. The line I use there is that we're not so much divided as we are disconnected. So we had all this wonderful workforce out there, but nobody knew of each other. Nobody was supporting each other, helping each other, or pushing each other, right? Often. Of course, our entire community isn't that the case. And I had to invoke the next wave of diversity and inclusion best practices to a secondary, to better connect with the African American market. See, the mastery of diversity and inclusion and the value of diversity and inclusion is when you can exercise some cultural intelligence around issues. I took an aim at the mindset in the marketing campaigns for black families that were traditionally different from whites at the time, both overtly and covertly. What I saw was 20 years ago in both outreach and conversation was in marketing to black people around primarily for burial and children's policies, right? The $10,000, the $20,000, maybe $100,000 whole life, which I believe was steeped in old stereotypes about the only thing that black people cared for and care about. We needed to employ diversity and inclusion best practices so we could evolve our strategies into what resonates with the community now. And to not tell them what they want, but to ask them what they need. What I saw and what I heard and what I responded to for what they needed was a financial safety net, investment guarantees, tax advantages, and creating an inheritance. It took a minute for me to figure out the direction with this, and it was actually by accident when I discovered it and the light bulb went on for me about what life insurance truly is and how to convey how others are using it differently than us. Okay? It happened when I completed this management development program after 2 years. And I received a letter in the interoffice mail that said, congratulations on your promotion to an assistant vice president. As a newly appointed officer of the company, we want to take out $2.5 million on your life to benefit the retirement fund of New York Life. Exactly. Right? So I went to ask the folks, well, what is this about? And they said, well, we call this corporate-owned life insurance, COLI. How many know about COLI? Well, this insurance industry don't. Yeah, that's right. They say, well, you know, as you move up in the company and we give you more benefits, we take out more investments for ourselves. And here is one that we can offset your salary with this $2.5 million life insurance policy. We made it sort of analogous to like a key man policy in a small business. That's right. Now as you move up, we see you as a key employee. Okay, I guess I get this concept of the key man. Right. But tell me where this $2.5 million comes from, right? And so that's when they said, well, that's what the company values you at. They said that's what you're worth here for the work that you do and the contributions you make. I said, I don't get it. And they said, well, there's different ways to calculate your value and your work. The easiest way to do it is to do a current value of your future earnings. Here you are, 30 years old, making $100,000 a year, and we expect you to work here another 25 years or so until retirement, right? With the mathematicians there. What's $100,000 a year for 25 years? $2.5 million. Right? So this is what we're going to pay you, just taking into consideration. But as a black man in America, this is the first time I had ever heard this. And then I only thought that what I had to work and what my value was in my title, right? Assistant Vice President. And or the car or the house or the clothes or the things that I could show, right? But these folks were valuing me very differently and not tied to tangible items, right? And then I became extra sad because what I realized was that they valued me more than I valued myself. Right? But when I did let it sink in, I then realized I had to take better care of myself. Right? As I would if I had $1 million car, or $1 million house, or $1 million racehorse. Because let me ask you, if you had $1 million racehorse, would you have it staying up late at night? Smoking and drinking? Right? Going to the club? Eating fried food, not exercising, not going to the vet visits. See, we would take care of $1 million racehorse more than we do our own $1 million selves. You guys get where this is going?
Oh, yeah.
And see, we as a community need to take better care of ourselves. That's part of the agenda for this conference. We must think and plan better for our future. Again, part of the conference. And have higher expectations, especially for our children. Right? Back to this. You see, it took me several years to buy $2.5 million of insurance on myself because I didn't believe it. Right? Just get that emotional space there. I didn't believe I was $1 million asset. But when I did recognize it and realize it, that policy became a priority to me. As I am $1 million asset to myself and my family and my community. We are all $1 million assets to ourselves and our families. And here it was, the message for the agents to help our clients value themselves, as well as for the company now to value us as clients in the community too, as not just being forbearing. Right? So I use this cultural intelligence for the marketing and advertising areas, for the sales and the promotion and the training teams, and for those people making decisions in the organization, to change their conversation with us now from burial time policies to wealth building. The question I regularly ask the agents was, how many black millionaires will you help create with life insurance? And this new direction resulted in increased face of it, higher premiums, better policy retention, and reduced lapses, i.e. profit straight to the bottom line. You guys get where I'm going? And after that was implemented, I continued to apply diversity and inclusion tactics to the third area, the recruiting and retention of agents themselves. Remember I said that the upside was for the sales and the downside was the agents, who had been seen as the underperforming team. I saw there was a lack of connection for the company with the agents. And this was primarily around their diversity and inclusion. It's an wasteful endeavor to recruit and not retain people after investing in them. So my intention was to speak to the people we'd hired who are now our own people. By my tugging on their heartstrings at some of our focus meetings, I asked the agents, how can we make sure that their work is more than just about a product and commissions? We talked about how to make this career about a bigger movement, because I knew that this was going to speak to them. This was incorporating the power of purpose to who they were and their own success and their desire to give back. This was not ignoring their background or ignoring their cultural identity. In fact, how do you talk about legacy and not talk about culture and history and our background and everything that makes us unique and special and who we are? This idea that everyone should just be the same, and everyone should just use the same, ignores the fact that we are diverse. That ignores and devalues those of us who don't fit the traditional mold of whatever something is. So again, I went against that recruiter's line about, I don't see race, I don't see color. But flipped it to say, there is value in our difference. And I saw in the agents that there was value in them, and who they were, and I didn't run from it. I embraced it. I embraced their diversity, their diverse experience and perspective, and intellectual strengths and geographical expertise. All of that I valued as an organizational asset to help the business. The key thing I think I did was, in our meetings, I asked how many of them owned $1 million of insurance on themselves. And at first, not many hands went up. Right? And I began to speak to them about how valuable they are to themselves and their family and the community. A simple equation that I gave them, like I was given, was to take on $60,000 of sales a year, which is a basic commission level for us. And doing that for 20 years to become a senior agent in the company. $60,000 a year for 20 years is $1.2 million. Right? Shouldn't they at least have enough insurance in place to replace their income if they don't make it home tomorrow? And I also stress that if you don't own it, then how can you comfortably and convincingly sell it? I painted a picture that if any of them, we call them our Nylick family, New York Life Insurance Company, Nylick family, were to pass away, then shouldn't we deliver $1 million check back to the wife or the husband or the family or the person that is gone? And this is what we needed to bring to our community for their financial empowerment. And in doing so, I created an empowerment, listen to it, an empowerment initiative that resonated with them. And it got them motivated, and it got them triggered, and it got them to claim that this was a career with a greater purpose. We call ourselves ambassadors of a movement focused on long-term community impact, and this was significant. Listen to this. I heard it once said that a job is what you're paid for, but a calling is what you're made for. Many of the agents have just come to New York Life for a good job. Many of you might have come for a good job. Right? A good job is what you're paid for, and a calling is what you're made for. And in creating this empowerment initiative, which was so much more than just a job, I gave them something that, to hear them tell it, was more in line of a calling. A calling to transform communities. A calling to be impactful in the largest possible way. To not just helping with this one person, with this one thing, but helping generations, multiple generations, to transform them. And that's the power of what life insurance can do. Transform their futures, transform the financial future of the community that we're all a part of. That's the goal. And in this mission, I told them that they also needed to be the best agents in the industry in order to compete with other folks working in our community that some feel are better suited to financial planning than we are. I'll leave that one alone, but you know where I'm going, right? And because of this new context of a calling, the conversation about designations, credentials, and areas of specialty changed. You see, for a calling, they were more open to professionally improving themselves. You don't usually do that for a job, right? When you have a job, you're just usually there to punch in and punch out. But when you have a calling and a purpose-driven, when you understand that you have been adorned with gifts and talents that are meaningful to the world, that you have a contribution to make that is significant, then you are interested in investing in yourself. Because you understand that you have some real work to do and your work means something. So now they were ready to go back and take those extra classes, to go get their Series 6, the CLU, the CFP, etc. Now the way they showed up was different, right? And when they talked about what they do, it was different. When people asked what they do, they didn't say that I just sell product. They said that I change lives and I help transform communities. That's what comes from being guided by a call. And then I shared more with them about the fact that our community doesn't receive proper financial planning information from anyone else, especially the reality TV, the athletes and the entertainers, and the social media that we have everywhere in our lives, right? And we could probably deal with with not receiving the information. But ours is even worse. Because what do we have? We have, we are out there getting messaging, but it's the total opposite. It's the anti-messaging. We're getting deliberate and targeted messaging that is counter to our interests. We're getting messaging that says, spend, spend, spend. Consume, consume, consume. Don't worry about tomorrow. Live for the moment because YOLO. You only live once. That's my millennial vernacular. You see, I'm not one of those. So it's not that we're not getting messaging. It's just that none of it is positive and none of it benefits us. It's all designed to benefit someone else. So I said to them, if not you to properly educate them, then who? And if not now, then when? And if that's not enough, I tied many of our meetings and messages to African American history. And we visited historical cities tied to the Civil Rights Movement. We went to Birmingham and to Atlanta. We went to the Black History Museum in DC. This significantly enhanced the agent affinity and alignment. And what we call the 5 Ps. Our pride, our passion, our purpose, our having a plan, and making it personal. That's what we were doing for our Black market, right? But our Black pride within the company, our Black pride, our passion, purpose, having a plan, making it purpose. And from all of this, what do you expect happened? Yes, the agent production, their retention, their achievement levels, and their promotion into management increased. I.e. again, profit to the bottom line. And beyond that, though, this, I want to tell you, is what company boards want to talk about. This is what CEOs want to know about and what they perk up about, right? The positive change in the numbers and the data. The data, even if they don't believe in what we're doing, the data is what they pay attention to. And the data doesn't lie. And that's why this argument for the business case and the business imperative is so important. Lastly, for the African American market now, I incorporated still more diversity inclusion practices in the way of the 4th area, education, outreach, and community engagement. In 2011, I tied our African American market message to the racial wealth gap in America. I'd come across a report back then from the Institute on Asset and Policy Services that stated that the median wealth gap was at $236,000 between the average Black family and the average white family back then. And the light bulb went on for me to say that, as I thought about it, what if everyone in the family, if every family had at least a $250,000 life insurance in place, then as someone passed away, every family would be moved on par to the general market in at least one generation. You guys get the math of me on this?
Oh yeah.
Playing this out in concept, I began to multiply it out, covering more families. And then I grew this thought by the number of policies written in a year by the Black agents, and then said, you know what if in 5 years span, we could get 200,000 Black people to see the value of only at least $250,000 of life insurance? Because that, if you multiply it out, 200,000 times 250,000 will create $50 billion of protection and tax-free, because life insurance passes tax-free future income for the Black community, as long as they kept it in. And what could the families, the friends, and the businesses of 200,000 Black people do with $250 billion at some point in the future? This became the vision, which became the mission, and then our movement. For this $50 billion empowerment plan that I created, the 50B we called it, we created agent brochures and lapel pins and presentations and scripts, and recognitions and promotions. Now we had a collective vision and destination. Think about that. That's part of the problem. We don't know where we're going. We don't have a set vision and destination of where we're going. We did in this initiative, along with the ability to track every agent's participation, every local office involvement, and then it had a regional and a national rollout. We would become financial educators first, to spread the message about what we don't know as a community about the true power of this underleveraged and underutilized financial tool called life insurance. And we were going to create millions individually and billions collectively as inheritance and true financial legacy. Through agent relationships and outreach, we brought the 50B to pastors and to organizational leaders, to colleges, to the press, and to everyday families. We shared it as a movement we were on and became confident enough to say, listen, this might not be ready for you. You might not be ready for it, but who do you know that you can refer us to? Because we're not going to stop driving this message. But it wasn't easy. Let me tell you, it was not easy, right? This wasn't people lining up for new Jordans or big screen TVs on Black Friday or for the sold out Popeye sandwich. I'm just saying. We were talking about an intangible product for the long term that takes sacrifice and commitment, right? We were talking about changing mindsets and spending habits. And of course, we ran into a huge lack of trust in our market, a lack of priority, historical baggage about life insurance, the what's in it for me to promote your message mindset, right? As well as the detractors, the saboteurs, and the haters. And then, of course, there were folks that were just afraid of $50 billion of black wealth and what we might do with it. The campaign actually took 6.5 years to complete, but we stayed the course. And in August 2017, I'm proud to say, I was able to stand with 200 agents, managers, community leaders, and advocates on the steps of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. to announce milestone achieved and history made. $50.5 billion of life insurance face amount is now in force by the 1,500 African American market agents for the African American community. In a celebration and continued promotion, we hosted a panel discussion that evening at the Marriott Marquis on bridging the wealth gap in Washington, D.C. with the head of the Black press, a megachurch pastor, the police deputy commissioner, a Howard University professor, and a local news anchor. This is what we had created in the way of a community engagement and celebrating our first $50 billion created by insurance professionals for our community. It's been so rewarding to actually see now millions of dollars and even $1 million checks being paid out over the last 8.5 years since starting the campaign as people pass away. One of the first $1 million checks was paid in Philadelphia to the family of a young nurse who succumbed to cancer. Another was in California to the wife of a mid-sized technology company owner who had lapsed the policy on and off and on and off, but it had to be enforced when they needed it. I spoke to an agent last week in Richmond who told me that he had delivered a $1.5 million check, that the family wants him now to create a trust for them, and that they want everybody in the family to do the same for their future and their $1 million. This work is becoming a major contributor to closing the racial wealth gap. You can see it now for these families, right? Can you imagine what it looks like when we have $1 million sitting in the bank to invest, to set up our children's futures? And it's something that we control. We say that we're doing it and it's working. Current death claims paid since starting the initiative in 2011 are over $600 million around the country. And the impact of the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, when the $50 billion pays out, is going to be huge. Think about the college educations, the new homes, the new businesses, the new opportunities to change what I pointed out at the beginning of this presentation as the challenges in our health, in our financial security, our criminal justice, and our education system, all that can be done with $50 billion. I want us to look back 50 years from now. My grandfather passed away 3 years ago in Grenada. We talked about the West Indies. At 100 years old. I just turned 50 this year. I hope 50 years from now that we all, that I can with you, look back at this time and this place of when a real difference was made in wealth building for our community. You talk about education, outreach, and community engagement from an insurance company. And I think this is it. What do you say?
Yeah.
But let's bring it back around to the business case and the business imperative. Not only do we drive $50 billion in sales, higher premiums, reduce lapses, increase recruiting and retention, enhance camaraderie and morale, right? Build success model for other markets to follow and become a recruiting and sales magnet. We built a stronger brand and image for the company. And what do we know about our community? Folks in our community are loyal to brands. loyal to companies and organizations that care about them. And we have enhanced New York Life and held them up as a company that invests in us. This is diversity and inclusion in action, growing in a linear fashion from individuals to the organization to the community level, all winning together. From the individual level, this has been the pattern and importance of diversity and inclusion, when people are valued on the personal level for the contributions that they make, when people are engaged because they feel they are able to bring their whole selves to work. And that whole self, whether it's their religion, their race, or their sexual orientation, whatever their diversity lens is when they are valued and respected, they are engaged and empowered. And the studies have shown that when people are able to bring their whole selves to work, they are more productive and they are more innovative. Studies have shown that organizations with more diversity in management and senior leadership actually outperform other businesses. There's a McKinsey report about diverse boards and their productivity and impact, and that they are more profitable. And so it does matter at this level. And from the organizational level, this has been a pattern for diversity and inclusion on the results as it has been born. The work actually transcends every industry, public and private sector. It started with corporations years ago, like Pepsi and Coke, who understood that their investment in D&I in order to drive sales. Then it was adopted by colleges and universities, really investing in D&I because they wanted to attract students and attract more diversity, because they understood it spurred on intellectual dialogue and added to the learning process, especially in our global society. Then you had governments who had added MWBE programs, women and minority business-owned enterprises, and supplier diversity goals for their contracts. You have hospitals now taking it on because of the need to keep communities healthy. So you don't miss when they talk about healthcare, transformation, and the Affordable Care Act to educate and to inform. They are primarily talking about Black and brown and diverse communities that need to be targeted and transformed. And this, of course, impacts their organizational body. And from this community level, this has been the pattern and importance of diversity and inclusion. I'm excited to see that the work I just described has contributed to the evolution and the manifestation of employing D&I best practices for the financial services industry, doing it well and doing it right. We showed it creates economic empowerment, which is especially important for African Americans who have been economically disenfranchised for so long because people have not valued their diversity and they have not been included. To employ these practices and to help provide for home ownership, educational funding, startups or businesses and expansion, as well as job growth, will put us on a path to financial stability, economic opportunity, and multi-generational wealth. For me personally, leveraging these diverse